Huh. Well, I said I was going to tell you the little story of the first time I tried to interact with a woman, a girl. Puberty came to me when I was about 12 or so, and this first date occurred when I was 13. And she was probably maybe 14. She could have been 13. So the problem here is this was in World War II. And unless you're my age, you have no clue what it was like in America in World War II. So this may be two little quarter-hour programs. One, what it was like, and how did I end up in this little tiny rural village in Montana with my father while my mother was at a military base. So let's start there. What was going on in America after the Great Depression, which we haven't talked about yet. But I was 10 when World War II started, and that was in December 1941. I became 11 the day after Christmas in 1941. And I was actually with my mother in an apartment in Helena, Montana. She had separated from my father, and she'd gone back to nursing in the main civilian hospital in Helena, where I was born. Helena maybe had 8,000 people, but it was Montana's capital, and the two highways in Montana, the east-west and the north-south, met in Helena. And so we were not, as a nation, really prepared for World War II. We sold to both sides right up until war against us began. But World War II started in Europe and Asia, two totally different wars, Germany and Italy to some degree attacking other nations in Europe, primarily our friends in England. France fell quickly. All the little nations in Europe fell very quickly. Hitler had an enormously successful military operation, very high-tech, and there was no one that had anything that could defeat Germany in Europe in the late 30s. Japan had attacked everybody, all of its neighbors in the Pacific, and it was the most effective machine there. So here were these two wars, and of course we were selling to both sides, both Japan and Germany. And there was a great anti-getting into the war movement in America. But December 7th, Japan attacked America in Pearl Harbor and basically wiped out our Pacific fleet. And we didn't really have an Atlantic fleet, and we didn't have an army, and we didn't have an air force, and we didn't have Marines. We were just not. And this was normal for us for all of our existence. We had not been a military nation. And so we had to start from scratch, which was quite challenging, actually. When the war actually started in Pearl Harbor, when Japan attacked us by air from its nearby aircraft carriers, we didn't even have a great way to talk to Hawaii. It was thousands of miles away, and all the telephones and radios and intercontinental satellite systems that you all are familiar with, none of that existed then. So it was very difficult for Washington, D.C. to even learn what had happened. Some of it came in on the telegraph, Morse code, typed word by word. And there was some limited attempt to try and actually talk on a radio phone or something that had constant breakup. So Franklin Roosevelt, our president at that time, was having a difficult struggle just learning what had happened. And it was a monstrous attack, and they devastated Pearl Harbor, which was our military base in Hawaii, in Honolulu. And just naval ship after naval ship, and the few aircraft that were there on the ground, much of it wiped out, and way beyond the capacity of the island to even care for the injured. It was a disastrous attack from our point of view. And what was learned actually during the first hours was told to the American people, not by Franklin, but by his wife, Eleanor. Eleanor had every Sunday a evening radio series, and she was a columnist, a daily newspaper columnist, and she wrote books and articles for magazines, and she traveled constantly because he had polio and he couldn't, and most Americans didn't even realize he lived in a wheelchair. So she was his eyes and her ears. So she's the one who first explained what had happened to us in Pearl Harbor. While he was writing the speech he would give Monday the next day in Congress that would declare war on Japan and would be printed in all the newspapers. So we first heard about this war from her. And we did the next day declare war on Japan. We didn't actually, I think, as I remember it, declare war on Germany. Hitler declared war on us. He did several really stupid things. He had declared war on Russia before he defeated England. And that proved to be a nightmare for him, trying to have two wars going on in Europe, one against Russia and one against England, and even supporting some war in Africa. And Japan had just brutally attacked China and all the surrounding areas. And after Pearl Harbor, Japan attacked all our colonies in the Pacific area, Philippines, and just we were sort of spread out there, and she attacked all of them. And easily Japan and Germany won every battle they started in the beginning. There was just no major opposition. Hitler had developed this formidable air power in Europe and had been bombing London for months. He invented the concept of war against civilians. Forget your troops against their troops. In England's case, like France, they didn't really have any troops, but they had civilians, and he could attack them from the air. Both the first missiles that would be shot over the English Channel and bombers. And eventually it turned out that we learned how to attack civilians, and we did that in both the European theater and the Pacific way more expansively than Hitler had ever been able to do it. And it's how World War II eventually was won, basically. But in the first year, which was 1942, and then the second year, 1943, things looked very bad for us. 1942, we thought we were going to lose, and we thought we would be invaded and occupied. We didn't have the clarity of vision to realize there weren't enough Germans to fight Russia and England and invade America. And Japan didn't have that capability, but we didn't know that. And every area of warfare in the first year or so, we seemed to take a terrible beating. But we militarized. 15 million, primarily males, went in the military here, way more than we had ever had in the military. And every woman in America went to work, replacing all of the men that went in the military, and adding. And every year we doubled our production capability. In 1942, we doubled 1941. In 43, we doubled 1942. In 44, we doubled 1943. So we developed this massive global war technology that eventually overwhelmed Germany, Italy, and Japan. And we did it primarily because for the first time women could fill every job that had always been filled by males. Now, the top of the company positions were still all male, but all the work and all the skills, and women turned out better than males. And there was a 4-year war, and when it ended, the males didn't come back and go to work. They came back and went to free university for 4 years. GI Bill. So really there was the whole 40s, the decade of the 40s, all women filled all major responsibilities in American technology, which was more than all the rest of the world had combined. At the end of World War II, there was us, the only superpower in human history with that kind of capability. And all the rest of the world combined couldn't match us. And today that's still true militarily. Now, what happened to my family was that my father was an alcoholic, and so my mother had struggled at first to make the marriage work, and after, I don't know, 6, 7 years, she had gone back to nursing at the same hospital she was a nurse at when I was born in Helena. And we had a little apartment next door to the governor's mansion in Helena. Helena was the capital of Montana, and still is. And she had allowed my father to buy a little ranch. He was very unhappy during the Depression as a used car salesman. He was very successful, but he was very unhappy. He had always wanted to live on a ranch. So they bought this 165-acre ranch in a tiny town called Willow Creek, 2/3 of the way to the college I started at in Bozeman, Montana. And it was near Three Forks, three rivers that form the Missouri River. And Three Forks, a little town, maybe, I don't know, 800 people. And Willow Creek probably had 100 people. So I went to the Willow Creek School, one building from first grade through senior high school, for the 7th and 8th grades. I finished the 6th in Helena with my mother, but then the war started and she had to go into the military hospital. And she went to Fort Harrison, which is where she had met my father in the end of the Roaring '20s before the Depression started. And it was just a little VA hospital where mustard gas victims of World War I were sent to die, actually. And all of a sudden, Fort Harrison became America's first paratroop base, Canadian-American paratroops. And it just grew overnight into this giant training facility. And Helena's 5,000 feet above sea level, so the very first thing they did was start jumping out of airplanes at only 300 feet above the ground, so there'd be less time for the Germans to shoot them. And they broke all the bones in their bodies. So the hospital just grew massively. And my mother became the surgical supervisor there and had to reorganize all the surgeries. And she invented a new surgical system that has been first nationally accepted and then globally. And I'm out with my father on this dumb ranch, which had nothing, no indoor plumbing, no heating, no phone, no electricity, nothing, till he put it all in. And in my class, there's 8. There's 6 boys and 2 girls. And so that's what preceded my 8th grade graduation when I was 13 and the beginning of this little first encounter in early puberty with a member of the other gender. So that's the story I was going to tell you.